Why, hello there, everyone. I just finished playing the Exoprimal beta test, the closed beta test, Phase 1 to be precise, which only lasted 3 hours. So 3 hours is definitely not a lot of time to spend in a game. Normally, I would like to spend much more time in a game before feeling qualified to give my impressions, but in this case, 3 hours was the maximum. The next phase is going to be on the 25th, and that will be 6 hours if I'm remembering correctly, and then they will do it again in August, but that time it will be a full 24 hours. So I will likely make a follow-up video to this after either Phase 2 or 3 once I become more familiar with the game through that, because my opinions will probably change, or at least will become more well-informed by that point. Now, addressing the elephant in the room, or should I say mammoth in this case, because this game has dinosaurs and mammoths are prehistoric. Get it? So, I, along with many others, were not too enthusiastic about this game when it was revealed. And since then, with each subsequent trailer, I've never been entirely sold on the game, and I think a lot of other people are still feeling that way as well, because first of all, they literally put a character that looked like Regina from Dino Crisis in the reveal trailer, so it was such a big psych moment. It was almost kind of like an FU moment to people who have been asking for a Dino Crisis remake for years, right? They're sitting on that IP, and a Dino Crisis remake would automatically start making money, right? That would automatically be successful, just like the Resident Evil 2 remake, right? In that same sort of style of remaking an old game. But instead, they made this EDF clone. When I say EDF, I'm talking about Earth Defense Force. So this game is basically Earth Defense Force, but also a little bit of Warframe with the different suits you can play. It's a little MOBA-esque because the suits have cooldowns, right? Whereas in EDF, the whole thing is ammo-based. Upon the game's initial reveal, I saw a lot of people tossing around Anthem because the suits look similar to Anthem in design, and I have to agree, I'm not really a fan of the art style in this, because if you were to tell me that Capcom was working on an EDF clone in which you're fighting hordes of dinosaurs with these power suits, I would immediately think of these tokusatsu designs, tokusatsu-esque designs, right? Especially because, if you think about it, the first Super Sentai series that was adapted into Power Rangers, the whole theme was dinosaurs. So a whole Toku-themed dinosaur fighting game writes itself, in my opinion. But instead of doing sort of a simple superhero-y looking Toku designs for the suits, they're just... This is obviously subjective, so I'm going to get into more objective stuff after this, but I have to address it first because this is some of the stuff I talked about in the reaction videos, so I thought I should address it. But I just don't like how busy and complicated the designs are. It looks like they're trying really aggressively to make it look real with realism, and it looks like they are trying aggressively to target it towards a Western market, which I'm not a fan of, because the whole reason there are Capcom fans in the West to begin with is because Western fans like the way these Japanese developers do things, right? They wouldn't have gotten popular in the West otherwise. So as soon as these, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but if Japanese developers start making their stuff look and feel too Western, I think they're going to lose the audience that fell in love with their super Japanesey games to begin with. But anyways, I digress. So obviously the look is subjective. Also, the footage you're looking at is on low graphic settings, so obviously the game is going to look better on higher settings. I was able to play the game on high settings. My PC could run the game on high settings just fine, but this could be an optimization issue, which isn't that unlikely when it comes to Capcom games, because historically speaking, Capcom PC games always have such weird optimization issues. But I was able to play the game on high settings, but in trying to record footage at the same time, the footage was so laggy if I was playing on high settings, even though the game itself was fine. So I had to lower the settings, and it took me a while to get the bitrate settings right. I still don't think I got the bitrate settings perfectly correct, so this is all to say that the game does in fact look better than whatever you're looking at right now. I just recorded some footage of the matches for the B-roll footage, of course. And also, I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but whatever you're looking at, it might not be entirely representative of all the gameplay here, because even though in the beta test, you were only able to queue up for one game mode, it's a bit misleading, because even though it was only one game mode you could queue up for, each time we would get a match, it was completely different. So sometimes, well, okay, so the main game mode is basically Earth Defense Force, right? But instead of starting out on this big open map, in which you can sort of trial and error different strategies to get through. It was sort of linear in that they would give you these specific spots in which you had to go to in the map, and then once you cleared out the dinosaur horde in that part of the map, they would tell you to go somewhere else, right? So it's a bit more linear than EDF, but the main gimmick is that while you are doing this PvE co-op stuff, you're actually competing against another team who is doing the same thing in another instance of the game. So it is PvE, but it's also PvP in a way, because you're racing another team of people doing PvE, which is pretty neat. I have to say, that is an interesting game mode. So the matches start like that, but then the second half of each match is where it can vary wildly. So for example, and this is weird because when you queue up for this game mode, it says PvE, implying that later there will be like a pure PvP mode. But even if you queue up for this single mode which says PvE, sometimes the second half ended up being a legit PvP mode in which you are fighting other players, but you're also trying to pick up these drops, and the first team who is able to get 100 points worth of drops wins, because when you defeat an opponent, they can drop the drops that they were carrying. And then other times, they would have like a raid boss. It felt like an MMO boss fight in which both teams were put in the same room and they were having to fight one Super T-Rex raid boss. And then another time, there would be a payload type mission. So it varied wildly. I don't know if those are actually going to be separate game modes when the game finally comes out, and they just had it rotate for now, and they made it where you could only queue up in one type of game mode that was rotating, so that way everyone would coalesce into the same matchmaking, right? That would make sense, but it was a little misleading because when it says PvE, but then you're clearly shooting other players, that's a little weird. Not that it bothered me, I just thought I should mention it. So I might upload all of the footage. I might upload the rest of my matches. Maybe make them public videos, maybe just upload them as unlisted videos in the comments of this. But if this video gets popular enough, or if enough people ask for it, I can upload the rest of my match footage. I just thought I should prioritize recording and uploading the impressions video first before I just upload like unedited gameplay. Also, this isn't necessarily a game mode thing, but I think it is exclusive to certain game modes, but most of them would have this. There is a comeback mechanic in this game in which the losing team is able to pick up this power-up, which allows them to turn into a T-Rex. Well, I guess canonically they summon the T-Rex, right? But essentially, the player is turning into a T-Rex, who is then being teleported into the opponent team's instance of the game, and then you can go into their game and try to mess them up and try to set them back, so that way your team can catch up. And I actually really liked that. I don't know if I can comment on the balance of it, because obviously only having 3 hours isn't really enough time to figure out if something's OP or not. But it was definitely a very fun take on a comeback mechanic, so I do kind of like that. However, it's kind of a shame that it's only a comeback mechanic. I kind of wish both teams were able to do that. I think that would also add a bit more strategy, right? Because let's say both teams get an ability to invade the other team. Well, they might sit on it, right? Because they don't want to leave their teammates and go into the opponent's team if the opponent is about to send a T-Rex into their side, right? So maybe that would add a bit more of a mind game to it. But maybe the comeback mechanic really is necessitated, so we'll just have to see about that. But I did think controlling the T-Rex was fun. What's fun is that the T-Rex also got his own abilities, and you could just go ham, right? Because if you die as the T-Rex, you just get teleported back into your game, so you're just supposed to rampage for as long as you can. But he also gets an ult, which charges up pretty fast, and it's a one-hit kill. So you pretty much just activate it, and it can miss, but you're supposed to just walk into someone, and then you bite them, and it's an instant KO, so that was really funny. Most of the time, I would go towards the healer, because the healer is so strong and is able... I know I just said I couldn't comment on balance, right? But I guess I'll use this as a segue to talk about the classes. So the healer, since I already mentioned him, I do think the healer is the strongest because he is able to heal the entire team so quickly, and you can also overheal your teammates to give them a shield, and the shield does not decay over time. So I would always go for the healer first in PvP situations or in situations in which I'm invading with the T-Rex, because as soon as you can take out the healer, you can pretty much do damage to the other teammates without having to worry about them immediately healing afterwards, right? However, on the other hand, maybe it's by design that the healer is so strong, because even though I do consider the healer to be too strong, you can't just pick 2 or 3 or more healers on a team. Well, you can technically, but it's not realistic to pick more than one healer on a team because 1, the healer is so strong you don't need a second healer. But 2, the healer doesn't do that much damage. And remember, I said this was a race between 2 teams, right? So even if you have 2 healers that are allowing you to stay alive the whole time, you might still lose, because if you have 2 healers, you are significantly undercutting your damage potential, right? And then the other team, the enemy team, is going to have a lot more damage potential if they only have 1 healer and the rest are damage guys, right? So that might inherently balance out the fact that the healer is so good. After the healer, I think all of the classes were good. I did play all of the classes. So the main generic class was an assault guy. There were actually 2 assault guys. There's an orange, I don't remember the name, so I'll just say the colors. The orange assault guy had a machine gun, and it came with a grenade launcher, and he also had an ability that was like a knockback, but super short range, so it was more of a get-off-me tool, right? The other assault guy was blue, and this was a purely melee guy, and he definitely felt more like Warframe than the other characters because he had all these mobility options, but he also had a launcher kick, which I really liked. I didn't think I was going to like this class at first because I'm usually not too big on the like super fast, zippy, dual bladey type characters. I usually gravitate more towards the big tank characters like that. But I did enjoy the fact that he could launch enemies in the air with the kick. So it seemed as if the design was intended to have you launch enemies in the air and then melee them as they were falling down, because your left click instead of a gun was a 3-hit melee combo. But a lot of times after launching them in the air, they would launch up higher than you, so as you're falling, you don't really have an opportunity to combo them. You do have a double jump, so I thought maybe you're supposed to just double jump in the air, like you're supposed to jump cancel things, kind of like Devil May Cry. So it felt kind of similar to Devil May Cry in that case, since there were air combos with a double jump. But you couldn't actually jump cancel out of your melee. So sometimes at first, I was thinking that my double jump just wasn't working sometimes in the air, but I found out it's because you can't just cancel out of attacks with it. You actually have to wait for an attack animation to end, or at least get near the end of the attack animation. So I think if they want that character to be like a full-on Devil May Cry character, they should tweak it a little bit. But instead, they went for like this weird middle ground, because maybe they thought a full-on DMC character would be too OP. So again, I'm not necessarily recommending balance changes on that. I'm just saying that was my experience with that character, even though I thought he was really fun. Oh, his super was an install super, by the way. The orange assault guy, his super, he basically turns into the mech from Metal Wolf Chaos. This giant, like, gun rack of 6 weapons comes out, and it just fires a barrage of projectiles in front of you, which does feel nice and is really fun. But a recommendation I have on that ult is that I think you should still be able to jump or move around or something with that, because instead you're just sort of like stuck in place. So maybe they did that as a way to balance it, but I think it would feel a lot better and it would be a lot more fun if you could sort of move while you are in that mode or move faster. And then back to the healer class. The healer obviously has a heal. The heal, I didn't change the controls from the default controls. So the right click, it's this short range projectile that shoots out and then comes back to you, but the hitbox was pretty generous, and it instantly heals people so much and gives them a fat shield. And it had a strangely short cooldown, and I don't remember if the cooldown was just really short or if maybe I have to go back and check the footage because I only played the healer once. But it either had a really short cooldown or you were able to stack charges of it, because it felt like I was using that way more than I should be allowed to. But then his main healing thing was something you can put down, and it's like an AoE heal, kind of similar to the healing pod that Pale Rider can use in Gundam Evolution, coincidentally. The ult was just a big old fat heal for everyone, so the ult wasn't really anything special, but obviously very good, right? Especially during the PvP parts. I don't think the healer's ult is that useful in the PvE parts, because you're already keeping them alive so well. Being able to keep them alive more so isn't really doing anything, right? you really want the ults to speed up these objectives so you can stay ahead of your opponent team or, get ahead of your opponent team. But the heal, like being able to instantly heal everyone around you in a PvP situation, being able to synchronize that with your teammates, that was really good. And then the tank class, there was only one tank class. This tank class was the yellow guy, and he didn't have a ranged attack. He had a punching attack. That was his left click. It was punching. But he also had a taunt, which I thought was interesting, because it's like an MMO taunt where it draws enemies aggro. However, I couldn't ever really tell the range of it because it doesn't show you a ring around yourself when you use the taunt. However, when an enemy is aggroed, it does show like this blue arc going from the enemy onto yourself. So you could see which enemies you're aggroing, but even so, I could never really get a good sense of what the range was. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe they want the taunt to have some sort of skill cap, right? But I don't think the taunt was ever that required because you're wiping out these dinosaurs so easily. I think the game's a little bit too easy, but maybe, again, that's by design because it's not really... Having a hard time against the dinosaurs isn't the point. The point is to do it quickly because you're trying to race against your opponents, right? But the main thing with the tank, I should have led with this actually, is a big Reinhardt shield that you can pull up. Reinhardt from Overwatch. It's kind of just a trope in games now. I guess you don't really have to explain it. All I have to say is a Reinhardt shield, right? But you can shield bash when the Reinhardt shield is up, which was actually really satisfying. And the shield bash was so useful in PvP because it makes them go flying so far away. So if you're able to catch someone out, or if you're able to shield bash the enemy healer, it will CC them for long enough. It'll crowd control them for long enough that you can pretty much gun down the rest of the team before the healer can get back. So I thought the tank was pretty good. Keep in mind, even though I said the tank doesn't have any ranged attack and the blue assault guy doesn't have any ranged attack, there was a separate thing from the suits themselves called a rig, and there were 3 rigs available in this beta test. One was like a laser cannon, like a single shot thing. Each one of these has a big cooldown, by the way. So one was a projectile thing. One was a healing thing you could throw down, which was basically just like a really dinky version of the one healer ability that would put down a big healing field on the ground. It was much smaller and it didn't last nearly as long. And then the third rig was a mobility thing. It was basically another dash that lets you go really far, which was fun to combo with the blue assault guy. But other than him, I would pretty much always go for the healing thing or the gun, right? So even though the tank, which is melee only... Oh, I forgot to say the tank's ult. The tank's ult is a big tornado. It's a spin to win, so that made me automatically like him. But even though the tank is melee only, and even though the blue assault guy is melee only, you can put a ranged rig on them to sort of compensate for that. So I kind of like the idea with the rigs that you can sort of create hybrid classes, which is useful. Like, let's say, for example, your team doesn't have a healer. Maybe instead of having to switch to a healer, multiple people could just take the healing rig. I don't know if that's necessarily better, but I like the options, right? I like the freedom to sort of make these hybrid classes. Because even though it does seem to be sort of MMO class-based, or composition-based, with the tank having an aggro, for example, and a healer, right? Like tank, healer, DPS. It did feel as if you could sort of play with that a bit with the rigs, which I enjoyed. Speaking of the rigs, this isn't gameplay related, but just a weird thing my brother and I noticed when we were playing. The rigs each seem to have their own personality. They each have their own voice and voice lines, which is really strange because when the beta test started, you actually get to make a character. I just picked a preset and changed the clothing color because it was only 3 hours long, so I didn't want to waste time making a character. That looked super ugly anyway, by the way. I'll get to that. But you're able to create this human character, right? But for some reason, when you're in each suit has its own voice. So I don't know why they didn't just have you pick a suit with... Like, they could have just treated each suit as a different character, right? With a different person in it. Because they each have their own personality and voice lines, right? So maybe they just forgot... Or maybe each suit, maybe it's a lore thing, maybe each suit has its own AI and the voice you're hearing is actually the AI in the suit, because you never really hear the main character talk. It's weird. So, also, it's weird that you can't just switch between suits mid-match. What you have to do is, you have to select a different suit, and when you select a different suit, it will take you out of your current suit, and then you have to wait for a few seconds. So you have to press T, obviously you can remap these. But you press T, which is one key, to select a suit, right? So you press T, click on a suit, and then you have to go down and click select or continue, something like that, to confirm it. And then you have to wait a few seconds after it takes you out of your current suit, and then you can press Z, which is a different key, right? Whether you can remap these or not, it's a different key, that's my point. So you have to press Z to summon the suit that you picked, and then you have to wait for an animation to get back into that suit. So I'm thinking maybe they deliberately want you to have a vulnerable period in between while switching suits to sort of de-incentivize you from just switching them all the time, right? Maybe there has to be a cost. But I find it really weird because when you're starting a match, they put you in this briefing room, which I think is unnecessarily long when they could just put you straight into a match instead. But when you're in this briefing room, it never lets you choose the suit when you start a match. It just spawns you in the briefing room with whatever suit you were in the last match. So if you want to play with a different suit in the current match while you're in the briefing room, you just have to switch while you're in the briefing room. So while you spawn in the briefing room, you have to press T, select the suit, hit confirm. It takes you out of the suit, wait a few seconds, press Z, and it puts you back in it. And it just seems like an unnecessary amount of key presses and steps just to pick which suit you want to start playing as, right? Because in a game like Overwatch or Gundam Evolution, for example, right? Gundam Evolution's on the brain because that was the other most recent beta test that I had finished playing, and I really liked Gundam Evolution. But in Gundam Evolution, you just start playing and you pick the suit, right? I understand there being some sort of cost or drawback to switching suits after you pick one, but I feel like you should just be able to pick one from a menu and that's it as soon as a match starts without having to have this weird like briefing room period at the start, because when you're in the briefing room, it's after the matchmaking already found 10 people because it's 5v5. Another benefit of being able to spawn inside of the suit that you want to control immediately at the start of the match is that you wouldn't have to look at those character models as often because, woof, those character models are so bad looking. Those are some of the worst 3D character models I've ever seen. It's so hard to believe that a AAA video game company, Capcom, who has produced some of the best art in the whole video game industry ever, had a hand in these character models because they look rough. When my brother and I started playing, we were hoping that it wasn't a big deal because you're going to be inside of a suit most of the time, right? So as soon as we got in those suits, we were happy about it because we wanted to stay in those suits. But then at the end of the match, they have it's sort of an MVP system at the end in which they show you the person who did the most damage, the person who shielded the most, the person who healed the most, etc. And beside each suit, you see those very same character models standing beside their suit, and I don't want to see that. I would rather just look at the suit. They look especially bad if you play on low settings. Like I said, I was having to play on low settings because of me having to record it at the same time, and I don't know why, but none of the anti-aliasing options seemed to work well when I was playing on low settings, because anytime I would try one of the anti-aliasing options, it would just make the game look so blurry and muddy, so I had to turn off the anti-aliasing. So it made the hair on those character models look so jagged and weird. So anyways, I hope they either make the character models look better or just axe them entirely and let you just play as the suit, and you can just imagine how the person inside of the suit looks, because whatever you imagine is going to look better than those character models. Also, with there only being 4 suits in this beta test, I'm hoping they add more for the next beta test, because the game is supposed to launch with more, presumably, because in the opening cutscene it showed a bunch of other ones. The one I really want to play is, I think it was called Krieger or something like that. I was hoping that one would be in it, but it wasn't. So I'm hoping some of the other ones will be available in the next playtest, or at least the one after that, because it's a 5v5, but there were only 4 playable suits, which means every team has to have at least 1 duplicate suit, and I think it's a lot more fun when you're able to have like 1 of each, right? Although I do appreciate the freedom of being able to stack the same suit. Maybe that's just temporary while it's a necessity with there being only 4 units to play in a team of 5. I'm still sort of on the fence. The gameplay is very good, but I had no doubts about the gameplay being good because Capcom gameplay is always great. That's like the one thing I never have to worry about with Capcom. It's always everything else, right? Because I think the game's fun, but it just feels as if nobody asked for this. You know what I mean? I think a Dino Crisis remake would have been so much better And with the game being so much like Earth Defense Force, I don't know if I would rather play this over Earth Defense Force, because I think the main thing Earth Defense Force has over this game is that Earth Defense Force has so much more enemy variety, right? And what makes Earth Defense Force so fun and what makes you want to keep playing Earth Defense Force is that with the variety of different enemies in that game, they have a virtually infinite amount of content based on different enemy compositions, right? You have so many levels in EDF just because they can make all these different types of crazy enemy compositions because they have so many different enemies to play with, right? However, in this game, in Exoprimal, the only enemies were raptors or raptors that had like an explosive boil on them that would blow up, or pteranodons, pterodactyls. Every now and then there would be a spot with a T-Rex or a Triceratops, which was kind of like a mid-boss, something that was supposed to be like a big thing. Yeah, it was just a Triceratops or a T-Rex, and then everything else was just like a little raptor, or I think there was something else besides the raptor, but it doesn't really affect the gameplay at all, right? Because all these little things like raptors that are just cluttered up in front of you, you're just gunning them all down, and it's not really that difficult. So I'm wondering if this game is going to get stale a lot faster than Earth Defense Force, which is really funny because Earth Defense Force is made to be kind of a joke, right? That's another thing. If you were to tell me that Capcom was trying to make like a funny, self-aware thing where everyone's shooting dinosaurs, that's even more reason to make the suits look like a tokusatsu design, right? I'm repeating myself at this point though, but I really wish they looked like a tokusatsu suit. I remember in one of the most recent trailers, there actually was a suit that looked sort of Toku-esque. I think it was gold and it had like these fins on the helmet. So we'll see if that suit gets added in the next playtest. But anyways, once again, I will see you guys later, and thanks for watching, and bye for now.